Good. So let's go ahead and get started. So I just want to say good afternoon to the 2020 presidential debates, a retrospective approach, excuse me. And I wanted to thank Will Appleton, where are you, Will? Who's hopefully en route. He, of course, is a senator with the Associated Students of Cuesta College. And he approached me with this opportunity to discuss the debate in this format. And then I also want to thank again Allie Phelps for creating the space and advertising this to make it happen. And it looks like it has reached very smart and engaged people's ears. And then I would like to thank, of course, all of you for taking the time out of your busy day to participate in this discussion. And so that's the first thing. And the second thing I would like to do is just introduce myself a bit. And with this, I would want to say a very, very big caveat or disclaimer that I am not a political scientist, and I do not pretend to be an expert on presidential debates or politics for that matter. So, however, I would like to say that I am a historian. I teach African American, I teach Mexican American, I teach United States and world history here at Cuesta, and I've been a faculty member for 3.5 years. And before that, I was on faculty at Hampton University in Virginia, which is a historically Black college and one of the sort of foundational institutions in that group of historically Black colleges and universities. I also want to say that I earned a doctorate in history from UC Santa Barbara. And between then and now, I've had the great honor to work with many different communities, human rights organizations, civil rights organizations, LGBTQ groups, and able to apply my historical knowledge and scholarship to critical issues in the present. So the idea here is that although I'm not a political scientist or an expert on presidential debates, I'm an historian. And the whole idea of an historian or the discipline of history is that it highlights the human condition. So I would challenge us to sort of think, as we're approaching this debate, what is the human condition, or what is the reality that we're living here in 2020? So I want to actually share this screen with you. I had put together a little PowerPoint. I could share the screen, share, and I could pull this up. And I have a premise for you to understand, which is sort of in the title of the event here, that with these questions, the best way to engage the current presidential debates is through a retrospective perspective, as it were. And all retrospective means is this is right from the internet, looking back on or dealing with past events or situations. It's essentially an historical lens. I, as a historian, want to approach the conditions that are framing our reality through the lens of an historian. And that's sort of my opening gambit. And I would also like to acknowledge that this, in fact, is a conversation. So I'd like to keep it as a conversation. And I've introduced myself and just a few sort of opening caveats. So I would like to open the floor up or ask y'all what you think we should know, or how you're approaching this presidential debate cycle. And if you have any particular questions that you think I might be able to answer, or anybody else would like to answer. And you could go ahead and put that in the chat or chime in. And for some reason, Allie, I can't see the chat. I have problems with this all the time. Could you help moderate the chat? The chat.
For sure.
Thanks.
I got it.
Okay, so I'm not looking at the chat, but if anybody, so I'm going to step back for a minute and let people collect their thoughts and see if they want to share what they brought to the table, questions, curiosities, or comments.
You know, I have a comment. I don't know a lot about the history of debate in general, like what the debates have been like in the past, because honestly, I have a really hard time tolerating the debates now. Like watching them, like I find it frustrating. It's a frustrating experience because it feels like people are interrupting each other. I know they've rectified that to a certain extent for this next debate, but like a lot of interrupting, and it seems like the questions don't get to the heart of the issue all the time, and it seems like they don't, the questions that are asked don't get answered. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. So it looks like we're coming around this table and you're interested in knowing maybe the history of political or presidential debates.
Like the structure of it, was it different before? You know, that type of thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly why we're here, because the tools I'll give you will help us get to these questions, why we need debates, why 2020 debates are unique, what are the effects of the debate, and then why is it important to view the debates in a historical perspective. And I think a lot of people have that same question. So good. All right. So, and I have some talking points to help to answer that question. Okay. What else? Or is there anything else? Okay, it doesn't seem like it. So I want to go ahead and posit an idea for you that when we think about history and historical perspective, it's not so much as hard truths or quote unquote historical facts, but history is really a discipline that's driven by creating questions and difficult and critical and probing questions about the past that expand our horizon and knowledge of that past as much as our horizon and knowledge about the present. So I, as a historian, focus much more on the questions and the gravity of questions than any sort of particular fact. So we've posited these 4 questions. Again, why do we need debates? What are the 2020 debate? Why are the 2020 debates unique? What are the effects of the debates? And why is it important to view the debates within a historical perspective? And I'll tell you right now, for my friends and colleagues and allies who are in this room, I'm going to return to these questions at the end of the conversation, and I'm going to ask you to answer them. So have your notes, have your pen, and take notes. So basically, I want to give you some tools to help think about and clarify some important points and considerations when, like Ali said, there tends to sort of be a lot of noise within the debates, around the debates, and so forth. So I'm going to give you some tools to help discern what we're watching. And the first thing, before I open my toolbox that historians carry around with them because we're so critical, is that I want us to consider or take note of the fact that we are more than just mere observers of this presidential debate and mere observers of the historical moment. We are, in fact, engaged historical actors. And one of the effects and one of the reasons why the presidential debates are important is because it brings us together to ask questions of it, to ask questions of the candidates, to ask questions of the ultimate question, which has been being asked since the founding of the nation, is what type of nation will America become? So this is an important historical moment, and I want us to recognize the seriousness of it, and that we all are historical actors, and that we'll be using, hopefully, the information I'm giving you and that we're learning and that we're creating to take action. remember, this is why one of the reasons why history is so important. If you think about it critically, every action that you take or you don't take is based on your personal or our collective knowledge of the past. And that could be knowledge from one day ago, that could be knowledge and experience from a year ago, and that could be knowledge and experience from 100 years ago. Okay, so this is why this is important. So the first thing that historians like to do is we like to put things in context. Context is, I used to say context is king, but I think that's little patriarchal, and now I like to say context is queen. So historians are very good at painting a big picture of a current environment or a process. And historians, as we provide context and paint big pictures, what we're able to do is we're able to link things, people or ideas or places, and make connections that aren't visible at first, or if there's too much attention, right, to a singular subject. So the first thing that I would ask or to think about is to put the presidential debate in historic context, because context works in two ways. We're going to be able to put the debate in historic context, or what I've noted here, and we're going to answer Allie's first question, this great tradition of political debate in the United States across time, but we could also contextualize in time. Okay, so these are context is working in these sort of these two different ways. So again, I'm not here to give you the long, boring professorial spiel about the great tradition of political debates, presidential and otherwise, but many scholars root this political debate to 1858. And this was not a presidential debate or campaign, but this was a political campaign, in fact, for the United States Senate seat from Illinois. And this is known famously as the Stephen-Lincoln debate, or excuse me, the Douglas-Lincoln debates, right? It's Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln. And they squared off 7 times. And the format was very, very different from what it is today. I think that each candidate was given an hour to speak. The rebuttal to that would be in 30 minutes and so forth. But what we're doing by looking at this, the great tradition of political debate, we are able to look at the issues that they in fact were discussing at the time in 1858. Of course, this is 2 years before the Civil War. The Civil War, of course, was precipitated by the question of slavery in the Western territories. So they discussed the politics of slavery, they discussed popular sovereignty or states' rights, and ultimately contrasting understanding of what American freedom is. So that is the great sort of what scholars point to as the great debate. Now, the first presidential debates took place in 1960, and this was John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. They in fact were televised, and they were not. This is an interesting point I found in preparing for this little talk, that no debates were scheduled in 1964 or 1976. Because President Johnson in 1964 and President Nixon in 1976 refused to appear with their challengers. All that said, we do see from 1976 on presidential debates, and they have been included in the sort of dual modes of televised debates and on radio. So that is sort of thinking about the larger sort of longer history of political debate. And you could also tie the formal discussions of political debate to one, political campaigns, of course, because that's what they're connected to, and also more unofficially an idea of the public sphere. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later when I consider the presidential debates as a primary source, because what it does, it allows the public, you and I, right, to engage in political discussion outside of the formal political structure, right? We're not elected officials, we're not appointed officials, right? We're not politicians. However, it creates space, right, for us to share ideas, reflect on things. So you have a formal political debate tradition, right, but it expands, right, to the public sphere, and it doesn't take much imagination to see everybody who's not a politician sounding off on these debates, because if we could contextualize the present, okay, which is the second point, one obvious contextual point, right, is the pandemic. This is our life, right? So it's going to be a political issue. It's going to be a presidential talking point, responses to this, et cetera, and even how the debates go forward or not. But I sort of lost my place. The pandemic. This. Of course, it's the broadening of the public sphere, and the way we communicate our ideas has changed dramatically, right? I mean, it has changed dramatically. And this is, of course, is largely because of the growth and explosion of not just the internet, but the access to internet, and where we're accessing and how we're accessing and consuming this information of the public sphere. Okay, so those are some contextual points that I would bring to your attention that help us, think about. And again, to that second point, you could think when we're contextualizing the present, you could think about the broader context, which would be the pandemic, the economy, what have you. But you could also think about the immediate context. This debate that we're going to approach now is on the heels or in the shadow of the first debate, right? And since the first debate, the president has tested positive for COVID. He's attacked the moderator for the upcoming debate. So the first debate was one that was largely chaotic and had lots of interruptions. So the debate commission had to change the structure by implementing the ability for the moderator to cut off the microphone. So that's also a sort of contextual point in the present. Okay, so that context is queen, right? It allows us to again make and make connections, establish patterns both across time and in time.